Save your pity for the weak. Let go, no more excuses. Let go of the life you've known. Listen to your intuition. Don't let fear control. Let go of the life you've known. Don't let fear control. I won't live at the bottom anymore. Destroy the weak.
All right, good evening, everyone. And as you can see from the title of the video, we are going to be taking kind of a deep dive into the, I don't know if you want to call it controversy or not, because I don't think it's controversial to some people, and other people it could be, depending on what side of the aisle you're on and what have you. But we've got Tom Martz and Catherine Dreher back on with us. So this is 2 times in the last, 3 weeks that they've joining us. Catherine and Tom and we had a 3-mile long text message stream going here discussing this. So we're all going to get into that tonight, and maybe a little bit more time depending, because there's a lot to say on this issue. But without further ado, let me start the recording, and then we will get right into the Liberty talk.
In the restaurant of life, we're putting freedom back on the menu. It's the Missouri Liberty Report with John Williams, working with grassroots organizations and legislatures to make Missouri the freest state in the nation. Let freedom ring.
All right, folks, and we're back with another rip-roaring edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Thanks so much to everybody on Rumble, YouTube. I'm even doing this. I've done it Facebook Live the last couple of weeks just to see if I get any viewers, and so far not much, but what the heck, I have the ability to multi-stream, so I'm going to do it. All right, folks, if I don't know how many of you are aware of what last Sunday morning, I believe this all started with Tom Martz sending out a text message to Catherine and I about an article from the Heartland on Justin Sparks. And it kind of upset some people. It kind of, it was this, oh, that's a hit piece. And that was just kind of it. It was just, oh, this is a hit piece. They don't like him. This is from the, this is establishment slinging mud. I mean, all kinds of different things. And so let me see if I can actually, I'm just going to pull up the article real quick, and I'll go ahead and read it, and then I'm going to bring Tom and Catherine and Brandon in, and we'll start discussing this. But I want everybody to hear the article so you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you go to heartlandernews.com. That's heartlandernews.com. You will find this article. But basically, the article says a Missouri state representative waging a quixotic run for House Speaker may have been procuring state grants for a foundation that employs him, raising questions about whether some of those funds are flowing into his own pockets as an unregistered lobbyist. Traditionally, the majority party selects the speaker well before the start of a legislative session, and in this case, Missouri House Republicans chose Representative John Patterson from Lee Summit. But Justin Sparks, out of Wildwood, has nonetheless mounted an insurgent campaign to become speaker when the session begins January the 8th. But while Sparks' campaign website, sparksformissouri.com, says politicians have become addicted to your tax dollars and his supporters see him as taking on the Jefferson City swamp, the Heartlander has obtained documents indicating Sparks has sought and obtained millions in grants from the state. An email from Sparks to House Budget Committee Legislative Director Joe Engler seeks help in procuring $6 million, presumably for the National Law Enforcement Foundation, which Sparks has listed as an employer. I am asking for $6 million to be privately matched for a new childcare program for St. Louis County Police employees. Sparks' email to Engler reads, these funds will provide for the purchase of an existing structure, facility, and the first 3 years of service. The intent is for this to serve as a pilot program for statewide distribution after successful implementation. I know how much you have on your plate, and I appreciate you helping me. This email is dated February 8th of 2023. Sparks was elected to the District 110 House seat in 2022 and reelected last month. Sparks earlier had filed for bankruptcy. A 2009 court document indicates that John B. LaBarge Jr., then the standing Chapter 13 trustee for the Eastern District of Missouri, objected to a repayment plan in which he alleged the schedule understated Sparks' annual income. So there's where this all started. Okay, like I said, Tom kind of brought this to our attention, and it kind of just grew legs a little bit. But before I go any further, Tom and Catherine, welcome back to the show. It would help if I turned your volume up. Way to start the show, John. Good job. But anyway,
yeah, good to be here.
So
it's a good thing we swore at the very beginning instead of at the end.
Absolutely.
Got it all out.
Yeah.
So the FCC can't come after you.
So, let's see. Catherine, let's start with you because of your experience in you and Kirby's experience in your show Rogue Politics, where you guys were following the money. Let me just, and I want to start with you, Catherine, then we'll go to Tom. But Catherine, your thoughts when you saw this article, what was the first thing that came to mind when you saw this? Did you think, this is just a hit piece, they don't like him because he's running for Speaker of the House? Or how did you feel about this article after you read it?
Well, after I read it, I just wanted to dig into it more. I mean, admittedly, you know, as a journalist myself, it is poorly written. There's no substantiation in it, which is why I thought, okay, I'm going to find out if this is true. I just want to get to the truth. I have beat down Patterson left, right, up and down, sideways. I know his history. I know where his money comes from. I know how he has voted. I know very little about Justin Sparks. So I thought, okay, well, if this is true, well, then this brings to light some interesting and possibly unethical, you know, things that he's done. So that was my thought. I didn't immediately think, oh, this is just a hit piece. I thought, okay, there could be some truth to this. So let's dig into it, especially when we're talking about money. I thought, okay. Now, there are some errors in the article because, yeah, it does say traditionally the majority party selects the speaker well before the start of a legislation session, but they don't. That is not actually done until January 8th. So it's presumed that Patterson, we want to make that clear, it's presumed that Representative Patterson is the House, the Speaker of the House, but that election has not actually happened. So we just kind of want to make that clear. So anytime I see something about like politicians have become addicted to your tax dollars, I'm like, well, yeah, that is true. But then it says in here that they obtained these documents indicating Sparks has sought and obtained millions in grants from the state. So I'm just going to break down the article a little bit, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so it mentions an email from Sparks to House Budget Committee, which they could have gotten that through a sunshine request, who knows, to Legislative Director Joe Engler, seeks help in procuring $6 million for for the National Law Enforcement Foundation, which Sparks has listed as an employer. I think that paragraph right there is the most important, and that's what we focused on a lot. So the first thing I wanted to do was, okay, is Sparks, how is he employed by the National Law Enforcement Agency or National Law Enforcement Foundation? And it is listed, not exact, as employment, list the name and address of each employer from whom you, your spouse, or department children received income of $1,000 or more. So something you have to do as an elected official is you have to do a financial disclosure every year. And it is listed on this financial disclosure, National Law Enforcement Foundation, person's name who received income, Justin Sparks. Under the, so the National Law Enforcement Foundation is part of several states, or several states are part of that, and Missouri is one of those states. So within the National Law Enforcement Foundation is the St. Louis County Police Association, and Justin Sparks. Okay, this is where I'm starting to smell fish here. Either worked for or works at the time when he was trying to procure $6 million for the St. Louis County Police. And why it's starting to get a little fishy to me is I went to his website, the Sparks for Missouri. Man, I have so many tabs open. I'm trying to pull this up. Yes, I went to Sparks for Missouri after this came out, and it says, hi, about me. Hi, I'm Justin. Justin Sparks has been with the St. Louis County Police Department for nearly 15 years. Now, when you go to that website, it said that he had been. Like, he's now a former employee. So I don't know if some changes got made there on the website, but if you now go to sparksformissouri.com, it doesn't say, it's not written as if he is still with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
So something, I don't know, something throughout this process got changed on there. So yes, he was employed by the St. Louis County Police Department. He was employed by the National Law Enforcement Foundation, for which he was trying to procure $6 million for. Now, he wanted to do it privately. I have a huge problem with that. He says that, that's what it says in the email, that he was trying to procure privately $6 million. Yeah, I'm asking for $6 million to be privately matched for a new childcare program for St. Louis County Police employees, which he either was at the time or still is one of. So this is where we run into an ethics issue, I feel, because people, there are those out there that are saying, you know, the other conservatives that are on the, you know, bandwagon and are just the blind leading the blind, saying, well, there's nothing wrong with trying to procure money for, you know, a child care facility for the police. You know, oh, he served for 15 years. This isn't a bad thing. What's so wrong with that? Okay, well, first of all, that's not a function of government. Let's just go with that. Let's just start there. That's not a function of government to begin with, is to take my tax dollars, steal from me so that you can create a child care center for the police department. But second of all, if you are an employer, an employee, as he is or was at the time when this happened, he's an employee, and so now he's trying to procure money for his employer, which would benefit him. Now, whether or not he's pocketed that money, we don't know that. There's no proof of that I can find. But he has 6 children, 5 of which appear to be child care age. So, you know, if every state rep, anybody in our legislature decided, you know what, when I get to Jefferson City, I'm going to see if I can't get some money from my employer. Yeah, you're going to benefit from that. And I think that's a huge ethical issue. You don't do that. And I know Tom will get into more of the Constitution side of it. I'm just talking about from an ethical standpoint. So that's the problem. with it. And so in my digging, you know how much I love to look at the budget, and I do still happen to have the 2023. That was the budget that Kirby and I printed in its entirety, 2 binders full of. And I was able to find, now I can't prove this. There is, we are hearing that this possibility, but I did find in HR 15 of our budget, to the Department of Elementary, this is section 15.060 in the 2023 budget, to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Now, section 15 is not DESE. If you've ever looked at our budget, there's like 4 sections in it that they're just kind of like pretty much miscellaneous. It's just like a dump fire. This is just, okay, we want to spend more money. And there's a lot of like quadruplication, if that's even a word, of spending. so section 15 is not even DESE, but so to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education for the Office of Childhood for receiving and expending early childhood education grant, $6 million. Now, I have no proof if that's the $6 million we're talking about, but it just looks kind of, you know, it matches the storyline. So to say that this is just a hit piece, it holds too much water. And it may be a hit piece. I mean, people want to, I shouldn't just say people, I should say those on the conservative choo-choo train are, you know, when they go back and they look at who wrote, okay, so who is the author of this story in the Heartlander? Well, he's with the Herzog Foundation. And those that are really coming out, like Gail Griswold, against this article, I think there's some personal issues there because the Herzog Foundation, he's with the Herzog Foundation.
What the hell is going on here?
And those, yeah, I'm like,
sorry.
why am I hearing
somehow
myself?
It echoes.
That's okay.
I don't know. I apologize.
That's all right. So the Herzog Foundation is one of the, I don't know if you remember, let's go back to last year with the stupid education freedom bill, you know, Koenig, and we were discussing ESAs. I don't remember if you, Stacy Shore, or not Stacy, maybe it's her mom, was having a conversation with Schroyer, and he didn't know what ESAs are. So the Herzog Foundation is one of the ESAs, which is Educational Savings Account. They're one of the vendors for giving out grant money. And so the author of this story in Heartlander, I can't remember what his role is. He's pretty high up. I don't know if he's the director or he's up there with the Herzog Foundation. And the Herzog Foundation, like I said, they're one of the ones that they're a vendor with the whole ESA program. So anyway, just trying to give some, like, this is why some people are saying this is just a hit piece and they don't trust the author because of his affiliation with the Herzog Foundation. But at the same time, when we started digging into it, I was like, okay, well, let's go back to, again, that one paragraph that I think is very important, that he emailed the legislative director seeking help in procuring $6 million presumably for the National Law Enforcement Foundation, which Sparks has listed as an employer. So he's seeking money for an organization that he is employed by.
Yeah, it's on, and I know I know Tom, you can jump in here. I know you've been kind of digging to see if you can get folks, this is what we're waiting on. We are waiting on confirmation that this $6 million was the earmark for this, daycare center, this childcare center in St. Louis County. This is what we're waiting on, the confirmation. But Tom, jump in here and give us your take on, you saw the article, your first take, dive in, and then we'll go to Brandon, get his thoughts on this as well. But Tom, what was your first take on this, and what kind of, Because again, you mentioned that you offered you sent like 8 messages to Sparks inviting him on your show to come on and talk about his run for Speaker of the House, and you got no response and no comments back. But give us your thoughts constitutionally on this, and just your take on this situation as a whole.
Yeah, to follow up on Catherine's point, Stacy is the mom, Sophie is the daughter. So I believe she was mentioning Stacy Shore was talking to someone about ESAs on a radio show. But what I find interesting about the Heartlander, and of course my X feed is now buffering like crazy, so I can't read it verbatim. But it talks about how it's simple, to the point, easy to understand journalism. But as you read that article, and as Catherine read that article, and as I read that article, it's like, wait a minute, nothing in this whole thing is simple. It's not easy to understand. It's not well documented. So there's got to be something. I mean, even if there's nothing here, somebody actually ought to look into it. So that was the essence of the text messages that we were doing last Sunday. And there's, in every single piece of literature, I don't care whether you're reading articles against Donald Trump, whether you're reading articles against Joe Biden, whether you're whatever it is, no matter which side of the political spectrum you sit on, there is always little tidbits of factual information in just about every single piece I've ever read. And what they make you as a reader do is to ferret out which part of the information is true and correct. Now, whether Sparks gets nominated for Speaker, whether Patterson gets nominated for Speaker, it doesn't really bother me in either way. Like I said this morning on the radio, no matter which one is in there, I know for a positive fact the Constitution is going to be ignored 75% of the time. So to me, it's a constitutional issue. But I think when you look at this in the proper perspective, Sparks would be the one who generally would make the case that earmarks are probably not a good thing. An earmark is basically when an elected representative decides to use his office or his authority to get a certain amount of taxpayer money directed to a project either within their district or that they can benefit off of. And if you follow the crumbs that were in that article, and based on the amount of research that you and Catherine done, and I'm gonna credit you two both, because I figured out while you guys were doing your searching, I figured out that Brave is an absolutely terrible website to search anything on when it comes to trying to find information. But if you follow the crumb trail, you kind of generally get to the bowl of cereal that's leaking as somebody's walking down the highway. You found an article on YouTube where I think it was the chief of police, or it was somebody within the police department that was making overtures about how great it is to get this $6 million to be able to build this center, of which is going to become an early childhood development center that's probably controlled by DESE. So that means we have even more mind-numb children walking to the beat of the same drummer that DESE wants to abide everybody by. And then Catherine found the actual, what looks like it could be the actual $6 million that's directed in that manner, and it appears to have come from DESE. And I have reached out to a couple people that I know that know the budgetary system much better than I do. Catherine knows the budgetary system much better than I do. And generally where there's smoke, there's fire. So if you can find a specific, let's say they wanted 5.5 million, and you research the whole budget, you find one instance where there's 5.5 million, you're pretty sure that that 5.5 million went in the direction that this article is trying to proclaim that it did. And in this case, it just happened to be 6 million. So we're creating a private-public partnership to refurbish a building and to make it so that police and police only, we have an Article 1, Section 2 issue here, because equal application of the law means equal application of the law. It doesn't mean that you're all equal if you wear a uniform and a badge. And if that's what they proclaim it means, then what about all these other policing agencies that don't have a child care development center attached to the police department in order to incentivize the hiring practices and to get more people involved in that career field? And I also believe, and I don't have my Constitution with me, it's in the other room, but you also can look at Article 3, Section 38, I believe it is. I don't know what letter is attached to it, but it basically, once money is handed to the government believes it's their money. So you can't just go out willy-nilly giving all these different tax credits and money towards all these different things, because that's a violation of the Constitution. So if you're going to proclaim, and I've never heard Justin Sparks proclaim that he's ever been a constitutionalist, I'll give him credit for that. I have heard him say that he is a conservative. And if you're going to be conservative, then be honest with the people and say, hey, I asked for and received an earmark to which it is that I possibly can benefit off of, because I have children that are of the age that can be enrolled in this daycare or in this child care learning center, and I can benefit off of that. But I think there are a whole lot of people out there, and most of them are on the right. I don't think the left cares. But as soon as they see an article like this, their first instance is, oh, it's a hit piece, or no, it's full of crap. They don't know what they're talking about. It's almost like if they love an issue or they love an individual, as soon as an article comes out and somewhat even barely discredits them, they would jump on the bandwagon, and anybody who reaches out and goes, well, is there any truth to this article? And then when you start posting perhaps the truth in this article, all of a sudden you're a Biden-Harris lover, or you're a John Patterson supporter, or you're a Missouri communist. Why do you even live in this state? I mean, we've lost the availability of how to think critically, and that is a sad denigration of society.
Absolutely. I want to say one thing before we go to Brandon here and get his thoughts. My thing is, so the one news article that I found, they got a private money. They got money from some private, some family, and it was like, I think it was like $2.4 million roundabout. The thing is the funding and everything said 3 years, so it's 3 years worth. And my question is, okay, well, if you're a conservative, if you're truly a conservative, the question that I would be asking is, what do we do after 3 years? When that money runs out, what are you going to do? 9 times out of 10, they're going to the taxpayers, and they're going to demand the taxpayers fund this daycare center for St. Louis County, police employees. So now you've just saddled the taxpayers with more of a burden, and, you're out here claiming to be some kind of conservative, and it looks like the taxpayers, because even in Owensville here, we had a sports complex that got built. It's got started through some kind of thing they won from Pepsi-Cola, and then they did it for so long, and then they wanted to hand it off to the city. And it's like, wait a minute, we were told this was never to be in the city's hands. This was the Lions Club was going to take care of the cutting of the grass and doing all these things. Nope, it got shuffled off to the citizens of Owensville, and now there's just more cost incurred. But Brandon, give us your thoughts on this. Well, first of all, the sloppily written article, but then your thoughts on an elected official trying to get money, taxpayer money, which he said, oh, these lawmakers are addicted to taxpayer funds. And now he's essentially trying to do the same thing he's accused everybody else of doing.
Yeah. Well, to what Tom was saying, when you read an article, it doesn't matter who wrote it. It wouldn't matter if Joe Scarborough or Neera Tanden wrote the article. If there's facts in the article, there's facts. And if they're making statements of fact, you can go cross-reference that yourself. Not as easily in this case, but in a lot of cases, you can just go fact check things for yourself. So yeah, I agree with Tom on his point that just because you don't like who wrote the article, that does not mean that there's not going to be factual information in it, or at least information that appears to be factual that you can back up for yourself. So you can't just call it a hit piece, especially when it outlines and somewhat details what they're accusing him of doing. Which the biggest problem for me in this whole story is the lack of transparency with the whole thing. Like, kind of what Tom was mentioning earlier. If you're going to be a conservative, go out there and tell the people the truth. Be like, I work for this organization. I'm procuring money for it. Like, it's the whole thing, too. It's not only that he could benefit from the actual program itself. It's that he works for the program that got the benefit to implement the program in the first place, too, allegedly. But it does look suspicious with that, the part of the budget that Catherine had that showed exactly $6 million. It's just too coincidental. Like Tom was saying, there's no fire yet, but there's so much smoke with this article. It's hard not to, piece some of this together and go, yeah, maybe that's wrong. And then back to the transparency point. I think if you work for any entity at all, whether it's nonprofit or a private organization or anything like that, if you have a separate entity that you work for and they collect money from the state, it should be required that information at least be available to the public. You shouldn't have to be asking your friends. You shouldn't have to get a sunshine request for this kind of information. If you are a state representative or a state senator and you work for a separate organization and that organization gets money from the state, it should be disclosed. The voters should get to know that when they're deciding if you're going to actually represent the Constitution that you took an oath to defend and the best interest of the constituents that you represent. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, the thing that's bugged me the most is really it's the two sides. One side, they say, oh, he's pocketing money. I don't like the fact that they're just throwing out he's pocketing money. Like unless you can come point blank out and say, yeah, here it is. I traced this money. He definitely pocketed it. I don't like the fact that they threw that in there. And again, to what everybody else said, yes, if you're going to write an article, please put everything right there in the article that you found without us, if you're going to state your case, at least leave some footnotes, links to things that we can, people can track it. That's the unfortunate thing. People read it and they're like, oh, that's the truth. Or the opposite side of the fence goes, oh, this is a hit piece. This is the establishment. This is the Jefferson City swamp that, Sparks wants to defeat and yada, yada, so on and so forth. But the thing that bothers me is the amount of freedom organizations out there that they just, as soon as that article comes out, so on X, it was like, I think Missouri Education Watch and all these other, several other organizations and just everyday people were outright just saying that, this is terrible. You can't trust them because, as Catherine said, the Herzog organization's part of it, and this guy, I think it's Corey Voss, and he used to be Missouri GOP and they create this stinky trail, and it's like, okay, this bothers me because here we see the groupthink in action. We've got people who, if they're in a certain group and they were kind of puffing this guy up and holding this guy up as like the next savior of Missouri, and you speak any ill, they lob insults at you, and it's like, whatever happened to just being able to ask questions? This is the reason I stepped away from one organization because I found myself falling into the trap of not thinking for myself, and that bugged me to no end. So I thought, well, I have to step away and I have to start thinking for myself, and I want to be my own person. I don't mind going up and helping with legislation, but when I start thinking like the group and I'm not allowing myself to question certain things, that's a problem for me because I want to take pride in the fact that I try to think my way through things. Again, I'm about as sharp as a bag of wet hair, but I want to at least make an attempt to be more intelligent, more knowledgeable in these things. And that's why I like talking to people like Catherine and Tom who had the experience and have the knowledge. That's why I have them on the show. So I don't walk around as dumb as some other people do, but that's my thing. The group think is so evident when articles like this are posted, and then you see the comments and everybody's throwing out names. It's like, are you guys thinking for yourself, or is it you might have to admit that you were wrong for, again, putting this guy up on a pedestal, and now you've been made to look a fool, and instead of saying, oops, we made a mistake, now you have to play CYA, and that bothers me a lot. Brandon, you were going to say something?
Yeah.
Oh, just one more thing to that, your last point about, because you brought up a minute ago how this is a burden on the taxpayers, because it's a program that's going to go for 3 years, and then it even says in this article here that the intent for the original $6 million is to serve as a pilot program for statewide distribution after successful implementation. So I'm guessing, I'm inferring from this, is that he wants to have a childcare system for every police officer in the state, just all across the state, just government funded childcare, but only for police officers.
I think it's
because that would be.
I think it's the NLEF, the National Law Enforcement Foundation. I think this is their brainchild, but he's helping to get this implemented because he has been employed by the NLEF. So he's just kind of helping kickstart it. What's that, Catherine?
Yeah.
I was just going to ask if I could speak to that point.
Yeah.
The first thing I did after I read the article was I looked up National Law Enforcement Foundation and found Missouri. So all you have to do is click on Missouri, and the first thing that comes up is Success Stories, Missouri. And it has the Missouri Fraternal Order of Police is effective and is effective and passionate about directly providing. Okay, sorry, I'm at the wrong part. Okay, National Law Enforcement Foundation prepared. So this isn't the article. This is the NLEF, Missouri. National Law Enforcement Foundation prepared a plan and provided data for the Fraternal Order of Police to start an education campaign on the need for customized childcare and the data needed to discuss funding options from the state. By March 2023, the Committee on Appropriations recommended a $6 million budget appropriation to the Missouri House to fund a pilot program that can be measured for effectiveness. NLEF educated the coalition on the issues related to law enforcement and child care challenges across the country and what other states were doing to provide relief to their officers. And then this is where the private funding comes in. February 2024, a pivotal moment for St. Louis County Police. NLEF announces partnership with the Michael and Naomi Meardor Family Foundation to provide the critical $1.5 million in matching funds to break ground on St. Louis County Center, encouraging an additional $1.5 million in private philanthropic support. So all you have to do is it wasn't that hard to fact check this article. Like, oh, okay, so yeah, there was a recommendation for a $6 million budget appropriation to the Missouri House. So I'm like, okay, let's go to the budget. Where's $6 million for childcare? Oh, looky there. There's some $6 million right there. And according to the article, like I said, they did a sunshine request, I don't know, but they got a hold of this email that it was Sparks that requested $6 million. So, this wasn't that difficult to just find the facts and piece it together and say, oh yeah, there's some teeth to this.
Tom?
Well, I found a section of the Constitution I was looking for. Article 3, Section 38A. It specifically says that the General Assembly shall have no power to grant public money or property or lend or authorize the lending of public credit to any private person, association, or corporation accepting aid in public calamity, which, based on this section of the Constitution, I believe that would be probably why the funding, as was pointed out in the text, that it appears to have come from DESE. So you could kind of shade the truth and go, well, it's not state money, it's DESE's money, and that was money that was pulled from the lottery. Therefore, it's not really tax money. But there's a lot of loopholes that you got to jump through, which is why I reached out to a couple people in the know on the budgetary process and how it functions and how it works. But clearly, and I know Ron Calzone has been harping on Article 3, Section 38. I bet you it's been since I moved to the state of Missouri. That's how far back his Article 3, Section 38A stuff goes. So it's not like the legislative body isn't well aware that they have delegated authority. That's delegated by us, the people. They don't have the authority to create their own delegated authority, but yet they do it anyway. And then the court system has allowed them to get away with it. And then when you start bringing it up to them, going, wait a minute, where did you get the authority to take this $6 million, funnel it into DESE, and have DESE funnel it to this childcare development center, which, as you clearly pointed out, is going to be a basis for a statewide system. They'll probably, well, we can do that. The Constitution says that we can. Well, no, you've created that mechanism. The courts have allowed you to get away with it. But it clearly says right here, Article 3, Section 38A, that you don't have the authority. And I'm sorry, you can't go to the Treasury and say, hey, by the way, this agency that I work for, and this is all supposition on my part, this agency that I work for, which is taxpayer funded, is having problems hiring people. I would bet if we were to fund a child care development center that allows new hires to drop their kids off to an area that we know for a positive fact they're going to be secure, that we can hire additional people to help with how it is our shortage, because we're having a hard time finding people to work in this line of work. Well, you know, we don't have those for truck drivers across the state of Missouri. We don't have those for firefighters across the state of Missouri. We don't have those for probably any other industry, whether it's governmental or not, across the state of Missouri. So why is it that we're going to make this one? We're going to start with this one, and then eventually we're going to create these, what I'm going to consider like a pre-K child care center that will probably be specific to law enforcement across the state, simply because they wear a badge and they wear a uniform.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to know how much would they earmark that if they called this a success? So, like, my big fear is that let's say they call this a successful implementation. So then they do decide that they're just going to fund early child care for every police officer in the state of Missouri. Well, I mean, are they just going to try to funnel that money through DESE in the hundreds of millions? I mean, that just seems outrageous. And then you know that if the private funding starts drying up, they'll just draw more money out of DESE and fund the whole thing through DESE. So then we're double on the hook, because not only are they using it to start the program, but if they don't keep the funding, they're probably not going to close all these institutions down. They'll just double down and fund it harder. So yeah, we're going to get double screwed if this is a success. This is by their version of success.
Hey, John, remember when we were doing that show that I think you removed it off of YouTube because of all the buffering? Wasn't the Senate bill that we were looking at dealing with the sale of alcoholic hemp beverages. Wasn't a part of that going to early childhood development centers?
Boy, that's a good question, Tom. Let me pull it up and see if I can find that bill.
I think it was Senate Bill 54.
Sounds right. Let's
I'll
see.
have to find my text from John. I know he listed it. He gave it to me.
Okay, here's the text. Let's see.
I could swear part of that was going to early childhood programs, which would meet the criteria, I think, if we were going to fund these types of centers through DESE, but use the tax through Senate Bill 54.
I'm trying to find that.
It is Senate Bill 54.
Yeah, I'm looking through the text trying to find anything on.
It may not be Senate Bill 70 or 54. It may have been one of those other two that we were looking at.
I think it might have been the
I don't see it in 54.
the licensure for hemp.
Mm-hmm.
The
That was a House bill.
hemp beverage bill that somebody, relating to the licensure of hemp businesses. I think that might have been the one that they were like, oh, we'll take the because of the I think the license fees. Let me see if I can find it here. Move the screen over so my old man eyes can see it better. Let's see. I'm trying to scroll through it quickly, and my old man eyes are not having the best. Because this bill is much longer than Schorer's bill.
Yes, it is.
Should we call him Steroid Schorer after that picture I shared with you guys again?
You've got to post that for people to see.
Yeah, I need to pull
my
that
goodness.
up and let's see. There's
He's
a
pretty full of
license.
himself.
Yeah, that guy really likes to, beat his own chest.
Was this the bovine bill?
This one here, I think, is Mad Cow or Mr. Bovine. This is the hemp. I'm trying to find where the fees, the licenses and fees go to, and I'm not seeing where that money actually goes. I just see. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not seeing that where the money actually goes. But again, I'm scanning quickly, and my eyes are trying to keep up and not having very good luck.
I vaguely remember reading something that dealt with early childhood, and maybe it's Hovis's.
Let's see.
But you guys continue on the conversation. I'll look at these bills and I'll figure
Okay.
out where it's at.
So let me move this window back over here. Brandon, what do you got? What do you got on this? Because this is something I think this is very important. What Brandon's brought up, because I was thinking about it in the singular, the St. Louis County, not thinking about this pilot program expanding through the state if they find this successful. And it does pose a good point, because if they're going to treat this like pre-K and what do they call it, early childhood development, then that funding will more than likely have to come through DESE, which means all this talk about, our teachers don't get paid enough. You have 2,000 employees working for DESE alone. So, and you're going to take more of the education budget and push to these pre-K centers that are set up. I'm not saying maybe if we even dial it down a little bit, let's say it's not for all these, across statewide, but any like St. Louis, Kansas City, Springfield, Columbia, big towns that have a big force and are having problems retaining officers, that this is going to be the new gimmick to keep their officers and get more in, is to build child care centers only for police departments. But this is an important thing. This is an important topic to think about. Is where will the funding come from? Is it coming from DESE, or are these cities, if they can't get it through DESE, are these cities going to impose a new tax on citizens or increase the sales tax or whatever they got to do to make the money up in order to continually fund this, especially the one in St. Louis County that's already, they're already breaking ground on? How will they continue to fund this? Will the funds come from DESE, which is, taxpayer money, or will the poor people in St. Louis County get stuck holding the bag on this one as well? So, Brandon, what do you? I mean, I know that was your initial thought there, but
just on the broader picture, I just want to get something off of my chest really quick. If it involves the labor of other people, it's not a right. You don't have the right to childcare. I've heard that argument online, just in the broader scope. Things that involve the labor of someone else, they can't be a natural right to you, like healthcare and childcare. So it's ridiculous to even ask the taxpayers to fund that sort of thing. So if you're going to fund this thing completely privately, then I have absolutely no issue with it. Then I think it's actually great that they're trying to recruit better police officers to the hard to get areas with private funding. Like that makes sense. Great. If you really wanted to get this done and you wanted to have a ballot initiative, or if it was on the ballot for the people of each county, like if St. Louis County voted on this and they had their choice, not saying that it's right, because anyone who voted no is going to have their tax money taken from them, even though they didn't want this childcare program. I totally get that. But a more balanced way to do it would be to have each county vote for a sales tax or a property tax increase that would fund this program. Again, I don't like it, but whatever, okay. But to take taxpayer money to fund these programs is beyond me. I mean, it just drives me so up a wall that, like, I have to struggle. I don't get I don't have these benefits. There's a lot of, and like Tom was saying, there's all sorts of industries that are vital to vital to Missouri. He mentioned truckers and firefighters. Benefits. Are we going to have to start paying for child care for all of them once the police officers get it? It's just a slippery slope of more of my money going to a program that's not going to benefit me, that I, by the Constitution, shouldn't have to fund. But that's my 2 cents on the whole thing.
Catherine, what do you got? What do you got on this? What's your opinion on what we're discussing right now?
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, that was one of the things I initially said as well, was like, this is not a function of government to steal our money to pay for childcare for anybody. I'm sorry. Well, while he was talking, where I was at. Maybe I'm over here on the Missouri Ethics Commission website, digging in the sparks for Missouri, and just for the fun of it. So I mean, and I'm not trying to seriously. Like I do not like Patterson, and I'm kind of like Martz, Tom Martz, with like I feel like whoever gets Speaker of the House, we're not going to get done anything that we would want to get done anyway. So I'm not trying to like rag on Sparks necessarily, but I did. Okay, so I pulled up his, like, this is from October 2022, and it's not a lot of money, but yeah, he got money from the St. Louis County Police Association. He got money from the Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge 15, Lodge 111, which makes sense since he's worked for them. But I'm just saying, like a lot of times when we see people trying to pass certain legislation or get certain appropriations done, who's giving them money? So, I was just kind of looking at that a little bit.
Okay, well, while you're doing that real quick.
It doesn't have a whole lot. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm just, for everyone's viewing pleasure, if you are watching the live stream now, you can see a picture of Steroid Shore on my screen.
Excellent.
He's just talking about he was on I guess he was on Speaker Tim Jones' show, and so he's got his head superimposed over some wrestling figure from wherever,
Yeah.
and
Well,
it's
Tim Jones funds his campaign,
no, okay,
so
well, there you go.
that makes sense.
Yeah, so now
That's
he's
where his funding comes from.
not only is Nick Shore an idiot, but now we can call him Steroid Shore from his picture because what a tool. But yeah, no, you're right. As far as as everybody's, I think, on the right side of this. And again, my whole thing. I know that some people are going to think that we're picking on somebody. But I think as people who, I think I can speak for all four of us, those who truly want liberty and want government out of our business, we may agree with somebody on their stances, but I don't think this is ethical behavior. I don't think he should be earmarking $6 million of the state budget when he's spoken out against lawmakers being addicted to taxpayer money. I don't think he should be doing this. I think we have every right, and it is our business and our duty to call this out. No, we're not doing this because we think John Patterson is the second coming of Calvin Coolidge or something in the state capitol. That's definitely not the case. But if I'm speaking for myself here. I am getting really sick and tired of people being hoisted on a pedestal because they say things and then their actions aren't taken into account all the time. Again, I hearken back to many, many years ago, my very first radio show, Re-Education Radio, where I was talking about this one. This was when Roy Blunt was running for re-election, and the St. Louis County Tea Party was like, we're going to hold our nose and pull the lever for Roy Blunt and hold him accountable. And it's like, the guy's been horrible for years. You could do that now, and you're choosing not to because, as Brandon said, he's running against a Democrat, and we can't have a Democrat winning. Well, you don't have anything much better than Roy Blunt. Now, I'm not saying that Justin Sparks is Roy Blunt or equivalent to that. I'm just saying we have to stop. Well, I'm going to ignore things because this person's better than this person. Is Sparks a little better than Patterson? Yes, he is. But that doesn't give you the ability to just ignore everything around you when somebody writes an article that you just shrug it off and say it's a hit piece and it's coming from the establishment and move on like nothing happened, when there could be some monumental or some big truths in that article. Again, I don't think I'm not so sure that he's pocketing money. I think that is just a step to that's one of those things they put in the article to really like puff it up and make it more volatile. But he clearly asked for $6 million earmark in the budget, and it looks like, again, this is preemptive. This is our thought. I am not saying this is fact. I'm not saying this is truth. It just seems a little coincidental that he asked for $6 million, and there's $6 million in a line in the budget for early childhood development through DESE. All these things are starting to come together. Now, we're still waiting for confirmation. If we get that confirmation, and it is so, then I believe it is our responsibility to call this out and say this is what the truth is. The parts of the article were untrue. It was just an attack, and it was a puff piece to again get people fired up and get them worked up. But this portion of the article, maybe one paragraph or two paragraphs out of this whole article, are true. They are factual, and here's what we found. And I think that's our responsibility as podcasters or journalists or radio personalities, constitutional instructors, to say what the truth is. It saddens me that because you think one person's better than another, that you have to ignore certain things. And I think, honestly, I saw this with Senator Eigel's race. I know I inflamed people when
Mhm.
I brought up the fact of his school choice vote, and I wasn't being positive, and I wasn't working for a positive outcome, and I was just supposed to ignore that and go on. Well, it's like, okay, but if a person's gonna bend on that, I don't fully entrust that person to have the intestinal fortitude to go on. I want to read something. Now, I'm not saying, again, this is not about Sparks, but when we're talking about people that we are put on his pedestal and worship because they're better than somebody else. Okay, so this is from Tom Woods. I love this post from that he put on X. If we do get a new Speaker of the House, of course he's talking about D.C., maybe this time we might omit the traditional spine removal operation. This goes for people at the national level, and this goes for people at the state level, because we see a lot of people who will beat their chest and say all kinds of things in the public eye, and then behind closed doors, they are not that person anymore. And it's like, where did your cojones go? Did you have a spine removal operation? What happened? It's questions that need asked, and they're questions that need to be answered. And it doesn't matter who it is. Mike Moon, who I think we all know is the most constitutional person in Jefferson City, could suddenly go off the reservation, and just because he's had a great track record all these years, and he decides to go, you know what, I don't want to be that person anymore. And people are like, well, it's still Mike Moon. Yeah, but he's clearly had a stroke or something, because he's not the guy he used to be. I should be able to ask questions and ascertain why he has made those decisions. It just bothers me that too many people on the left and the right, and some even in the Libertarian Party, say you can't question anything. What are we doing here? Like, now you're in a cult, and you need to stop it.
I have to go.
Okay.
So
Well,
real quick, just speaking to that, and I had to get out of a lot of Signal chat threads for a lot of the same reasons, because just that group think that it's like they just put their hands over their ears and go la 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 la, and don't want to hear anything that doesn't fit in with their narrative. And and I will say that I think that is some of the reason why you haven't seen rogue politics around a whole lot lately, because there were some things that happened last session that we kind of felt like, oh my gosh, we're going to get creamed if we bring this information to light about certain candidates and such. And it's a shame. It shouldn't be that way. We're not going to get anywhere in the fight for liberty if the truth is being censored, or you're being name called, or anything like that. Anyway, those are just, I have the same thoughts and the same opinions, and find it frustrating that, like I said, this wasn't even much of a deep dive into this article to get to some of the facts. It wouldn't have taken other people that long to have looked into it and discovered the facts for themselves. So.
Well, Catherine, I appreciate your time this evening, and Mary. Oh my God! Now my schedule is so screwed up these
Happy
2
New Year.
weeks. Happy New Year to you, Catherine, and best of luck.
Thank you.
And
You too.
anytime if there's another hot issue you want to come on, especially after the legislative session starts, and there's something that you really want to talk about, you reach out and we'll have you back on the show. I'd be happy to have you back on.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Yep. Take care.
All right. You too.
All right. That was Catherine. Let's see. I hope. Now, I don't know how. Tom, are you still there, buddy? Okay. Tom's still there.
And I found House Bill 393. It was Representative Dave Hinman in Revised Statute 144.028. It looks like it's a brand new section, which it starts out defining what a hemp-derived consumable product is. But then in subsection 2, it says for all tax years beginning on or after January 1, 2026, an excise tax is hereby levied and imposed upon the retail sale of hemp-derived consumable products to consumers within this state. The rate of tax shall be 2% of the retail purchase price paid or charged, and shall be in addition to any tax imposed under any other provision of federal, state, or local law. The revenue derived from the 2% rate levied under this section shall be used exclusively for funding of veterans programs, drug abuse prevention, education programs, and first responder programs.
Well, how precise of them to word it that way. Very, very, very tight-knit wording to keep out a lot of fluff there. Ooh.
So, I mean, you've got, if I go up above, so we have 2%. You'll notice it did not do any breakdown of percentages we're going to fund the veterans programs or fund the drug abuse prevention, to fund the education programs, or to fund the first responder program. So let's just assume that they're quartering it. So we have 0.5%, 0.5%, 0.5%, 0.5%, 0.5%. I don't know how much tax could be raised with a 0.5% levied for what's considered a hemp-derived consumable, but that is to be used exclusively for funding education programs. And who provides the funding for education programs?
Desi. Yep, full circle.
God bless America. You know, I'll be honest, guys. This is, I know this is a horrible, horrible thing to say in the eyes of some folks, but I am really sick and freaking tired of half these reps and senators. Now it's like hemp and marijuana are the two big tax earners for them. So we get it legalized, which is why here's another thing from my first radio show. One of my constant sayings on that show was, when it came to marijuana, I wanted legalization without regulation. Because I didn't want it like tobacco. Cigarettes, you had cigarettes for years. Of course, there's all kinds of chemicals added for flavoring and all this other stuff to the tobacco. And then too many people fell asleep with cigarettes in their house and burned their house down around them. So then they added fire-safe stuff to the paper. So if you weren't constantly dragging on a cigarette and if you laid it down, it would just go out. So if tobacco was so harmful for you, why would you add more chemicals to the paper? That drove me insane. And now, every time you turn around, hemp, THC, all these other programs, everything ties back somehow to education, whether it's pre-K or it's actually the universities or elementary and secondary education, whatever. They always want to, it's like tugging at the heartstrings. How many taxes do we have to come up with until we figure out, no matter how much money you throw at government education, you can't polish a turd? I know on Mythbusters one time they polished a turd, but public education centers are turds that cannot be polished. If you can put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig. But I am about sick to death of these jackwagons up in Jeff City. Every time they turn around, like, let's impose a tax on this new product that seems to be all the rage today, and we'll throw it. And I'm sorry, this is not a slight at veterans, but veterans are also, anything to do with hemp or marijuana, the money's like, we'll go to veterans and we'll take it to kids. And it's those two groups that if you speak out against adding more money to those funds, you're like the reincarnation of Joseph Stalin or Adolf Hitler. Like, you are the worst human being on earth for opposing getting more revenue to these establishments or these agencies. And it's like, okay, but when recreational marijuana was legalized, when Amendment 3 was passed, cities and counties were adding their own tax. So on top of the sales tax, and the state. So you had state, you had county, and you had city. And the counties and the cities were passing these. So by the time it was done, you were paying 20% sales tax on the marijuana. And it's like, when is enough enough? Now, again, the thing that bothered me is it was, of course, people don't want to pay that. So where do they go? The state, in its infinite wisdom, because, well, if we legalize it, then we don't have these black market dealers. You get the price up so high and they can go to somebody else and get it for way cheaper. Where are you driving those people? Back to the very black market you said you didn't want and you didn't like, and you spent billions of law enforcement dollars on busting people with pot. So it's just a complete circle of stupid. And but yeah, we got to throw this more money at education. Okay, well, if money makes people more ignorant and more subservient to the state, they're succeeding. But if you think that more money is going to get you a higher quality education with people, capable of critical thinking, then you're failing at an epic proportion. But yeah, this every time we turn around now, hemp and marijuana are going to be they're going to be the target of new taxes constantly for education. And when you have in the Constitution that 25% of the ever-growing state budget goes to education, why on earth, when every year the budget increases, which means the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education gets a bigger budget every year, why do we have to add more money to the till? Why do we have to keep increasing their funding? They're getting an automatic raise every time these big government Republicans and big government Democrats decide they want to blow up the budget more. Daugherty automatically gets an increase in their budget. So what's the push here? Except you want to pee money down a rat hole, and we're on the floor underneath with our heads getting wet, and we're like, who keeps peeing on us? Oh yeah, that's the people up there in Jeff City. Keep peeing on my head.
Well, I think the American population in general just has this totally misguided idea about taxes. Like, in theory, it should be on we need this money for this thing. It's like we all decided, like, in theory, taxes would serve a good purpose not necessarily a good purpose, but if everyone, like, it should be like, we need a new bridge because our bridge is failing, so we'll come up with ways to fund the bridge. It shouldn't be, we want to legalize this thing, so we're gonna tax it. Like, because they didn't have the money from sports gambling last year. I think Governor Parson was proposing budget cuts or tax cuts. And so, like, if you don't need the money, why do you have to take it in the first place? Like, why do you have to tax all of these things when you clearly don't need the money? Because if you did, like Tom was saying, when he was listing all of the things that this money could potentially go for, you wouldn't be that vague about it. You would be like, we need this money to repair VFW Hall number 469 and wherever. We need this to support this exact program to this dollar amount. That's what it would say if this money was going to, like, a good, air quotes here, good purpose. But clearly it's just a money grab. And it's because the American people, like, even when people were pushing for the legalization of marijuana and sports gambling, the proponents of those measures were saying, well, now look how much money we could make by taxing it. I'm like, you're the one who wants to sports gamble. Why would you say that? Why would you admit that? Like, why would you give the other side, like, that leverage over you to just tax the thing that you want to do because they don't like it? Because, like I said, clearly they don't need the money, or they would have stated what they wanted the money for a lot more clearly than just education, veterans programs, yada, yada, yada. So I think the big issue is the American people just have no concept of what taxes ought to do. Like, they ought to only be taken when you need something done, not because the state wants more money to just give away.
What you got, Tom?
Man, I'm still astounded that we've got people who think that we have to ask permission to do that. to do the things that we're discussing here. I mean, it's gotten to the point where unless government grants you the permission to do something, the thought process is that, well, I can't do it. And the sports gambling was a classic one. All these commercials talking about how all these states around us have the legal framework in order to be able to offer online sports gambling. And we need to get the state of Missouri needs to allow, the voters need to give government the direction that they need to allow this by creating a legal framework in order for this to occur. And I've been doing a lot of reading of Tench Cox. He was not a framer. I'm going to put him as a founder. But at the very beginning of the American Revolution, he was on the side of the king. It appears that his dad was an employee of the king as part of the Tax Stamp Act until they threatened his life. So he decided that was not the job for him, and he moved the kids. And then Tench ended up making money based on trade between England and United States. And then when the American Revolution was over, he was actually listed on all the criteria by which he was considered a traitor to the country. So they made all these people, instead of noosing them, they made them swear a loyalty or oath to the country, that they would not do anything to make it so that the crown could move back in. But if you start reading some of the stuff from Tench Cox, he is one of the most best proponents for not only the First Amendment, but the Second Amendment, the Ninth Amendment, the 10th Amendment. And never, ever, ever did you hear those guys say, oh, can I do this? Well, let me read my Constitution. And they used that term long before a Constitution was written. They never asked permission to do anything. They just went out and done it. Now let's see. My First Amendment says I have the freedom of speech. Oh, please, Mr. Government, let me say what it is that I want to say, because I know it'll be informative. Good Lord, we're a bunch of wimps.
Yeah, it is. I can't, quote exactly what the framers said, but there were multiple references that the government should fear the people, and we find quite the opposite now, that the people fear the government. And to what Tom was saying, I don't know if that's breaking the. Am I breaking the law if I do this, or do I have their permission to do this? It's like, it used to, back, like Tom said, back in the day, they're like, yeah, it's a natural right. I can go from here to over there, or I can own as many firearms as I want, or I can do all these things. I don't care what that jackass says. And now the script is flipped. People think they have to ask. They've been dumbed down and educated and propagandized into thinking that government hands out your rights. They stem from the government. They are not natural in any way. And that the proper, your responsibility as a human being before you go out and do anything, start a business, X, Y, or Z, you better go down and pay your extortion fee to the government, or you're going to get in trouble, because God forbid you might have designed a product that people would buy, and you could make a good profit and all these things. And God forbid that you do that without asking your overlords at City Hall and then buy a license to operate a business in the town in which you live. And that is freaking mind-blowing. It's like, what are we doing here? You're going to tell me that some idiot in City Hall knows how to... I mean, in essence, you're saying those people know how to run your business better than you do. That's in essence, that's what you're saying. It's just the same way if I wanted to put a fence up in my backyard for my dogs. I'm supposed to go get a building permit. It's like, well, if I'm having to ask you permission to put this fence in my backyard, then I expect every month you send me, I don't know, a third of my mortgage payment to me and help me pay my mortgage. Because to me, you're inferring that you own part of my house because I'm having to ask you permission to put the fence up on the property that I supposedly own. But if you pay a personal property tax, you don't ever own your property. But that's another topic for another day. But I have always told that to people, and some people look at me funny when I say that. But it's like, yeah, if you have to get a building permit to put up a fence that is not going to go into public property, i.e. the street or anything else, or city sidewalk or whatever, if it's staying within a boundary and you're not blocking the view of traffic or anything else, and you have to go down and spend $25 on a building permit for them to say, yeah, it's fine to build the fence, I think you should ask them for a portion of the mortgage payment every month, because they're acting as if they're part owners of your real estate. And I think if you could get enough people to do that, it would be kind of funny to watch the faces of the city employees as you're asking them or you're telling them this. They're going to look at you like you've been hitting the glass pipe. But I don't know. I think it would be an interesting social experiment to get it to rattle their BBs a little bit, as my father used to say, because it's what he said about people who didn't have a lot of going on upstairs. You say, oh, yeah, I can hear the BBs rattling up there. But yeah, I think it'd be an interesting social experiment to tell your local extortionist to send you a part of the mortgage payment every month because they're acting as if they also own your house.
Well, they might give you a free night stay at the. You might get a free meal out of the whole deal too, depending on how long you're there for and how much of a commotion you decide to cause.
Yeah, I might get at the local concrete and iron barred hotel. Well, at least you get meals. Your meals are included in this thing. Yeah. It's like a bed and breakfast with all the meals that are. It's just you get a horrible view, and the atmosphere kind of sucks because you're surrounded by drunk people and thieves and everything else. But free room and board. Well, free to you. Taxpayers got to foot the bill, so it's kind of free, but kind of not. But still, yeah, there is that. So what do you think, Tom? Go ahead.
Well, the nice part about it is that they got those really fancy chrome toilets to sit on.
That is very that is very true. They do have the nice, almost like stainless steel type toilets that you can sit on in full view of everyone else while you do your business. While you take the Browns to the Super Bowl, you could have onlookers, which that's a frightening thought. But
hey, maybe if I can find somebody to do one of those in a 3D print, just in a lot smaller version, instead of awarding a granite plaque, we can have a commodity, and that would be for the individual who scores the least amount of points.
You know what, Tom? I really like that, and now I wish I had a 3D printer. I would print out a commodity, and then we could put it, and then I could find some like trophy shop that I could affix it to a little base and put commodity, and then for the least constitutional, representative to the least constitutional senator. I wonder. And then to be a fly on the wall when they were gifted said commode, 3D printed commode trophy as the most horrible person in their chamber, just to see what kind of face they would make. Like, why am I getting a prison toilet trophy? And the way you act, sometimes you belong in prison because you keep violating your oath to the Constitution, and we're pretty sure you're doing a lot of shady stuff. So there you go. And Tom, I have to give it to you, Tom. You have a lot of good ideas. I'm just saying, you have a lot of great ideas when it comes to patronizing and intimidating. Well, not intimidating, but just giving your elected officials a really hard time. You've got some really, really good ideas there. I have to give it to you. Kudos to you.
Well, there's not a lot of there's a lot of open air space up there between my ears, so I have to fill it with something. So these things just come to me.
Yeah, well, I have a problem. I've told people this before that I think it gets on people's nerves at times, but I can't help it. So if I'm working with someone and they tell me a funny story and I'm laughing because their story is funny, I'm also laughing because in my head I'm making up 3 alternate endings to the story that they're telling me as they're telling it to me. So I'm laughing at their story because it's funny, but then I'm also laughing because I just made up some really awful, awkward endings to story. I'll give you a perfect example. One of my guilty pleasures is the original Law and Order series. Like I used to watch it a lot, even though if I watch it now, way more, and I do a much better job now of seeing the propagandization in the show. But I like a lot of the characters. But there was an episode. My wife and I we weren't doing nothing. And like, oh, we'll just turn on. It was like season, I don't know, 17, 18 of the show. So a lot of the original characters were gone. And there's an episode where a guy gets killed outside a restroom. Come to find out there was a house for like mentally disabled people, and this kid like heard it and anyway, this mentally deficient person at that time, because he's like in his 40s or 50s, at the time he was born, they would just call them morons, and the doctor would just recommend them go to a home. Instead of the kid staying and the parents taking care of this kid, they would just put him in an institution to be taken care of. So come to find out, one brother finds out that he has a mentally retarded brother, and another brother also finds out that the brother found out, and they get in a fight, and one accidentally kills the other. Anyway, the parents suddenly want the mentally retarded boy to come home because they know he knows the voice of the one person, knows it's his brother. They're afraid he's going to testify against him. So, let's welcome him home and we'll shut him up. So there's a scene where the mentally retarded guy, the cop takes him to his house and they're parked across the street. And he's like, you don't have to go home if you don't want to. And the guy's like, I know, it's okay. And then the guy the mentally handicapped guy starts to walk across the street, and the scene cuts to, it would have been a commercial break, and then on with the show. I start laughing, and my wife's like, what's so funny? And this is what I'm talking about with my horrible brain. I said, wouldn't it be really jacked up if he would have stepped out in the street and got hit by a car? And she's like, oh my God, no, that's not funny. So then we go and we finish the episode, and I start laughing even harder. And she's like, now what? And I go, wouldn't it have been funny if he stepped out in the street, got hit by a car, and he's like going head over heels up in the air, and he's like, it's all right, I'm okay. And then he smacks into the concrete. And she's like, no, that's not funny. But I can't help it. And she honestly at some points gets really ticked off at me because I'll say something, she'll be watching a show and I'm just doing whatever. I'm looking up stuff on my phone or whatever. And I will just insert commentary that somebody was going to say. I'll just add a line in, and she just looks at me. And after a while, she's like, would you please stop that? That's actually getting on my nerves now. I'm like, but that's my brain. Full tilt. When I'm watching a show, I'm just making up alternate stuff to all this stuff going on. And in my head, it's hilarious. And to a lot of other people, it's probably actually not that funny. I just can't help myself by doing it. But anyway.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, here's a joke that you can. Here's
Sorry,
a
go
joke
ahead.
that you can tell your wife.
Okay.
Okay, ask her why are women evacuated first in a disaster.
Oh, is this the one so the men can have peace and quiet while they figure out how to fix the problem or whatever?
Yeah, so men can think of a solution in silence.
Okay. I'm going to tell a very politically incorrect joke right now. I'm not saying it's okay to hit a woman, but when the first time I heard this joke, I died laughing. And it's just because I like dark humor. Some dude at work comes up to me, he's like, what do you tell a woman with 2 black eyes? I said, I don't know. And he goes, nothing. You done told her twice. And I was like, holy crap. That is freaking brutal, dude. But I laughed hysterically at the joke. So I didn't help myself in any way, shape, or form. Couldn't help
Now,
it.
see, I heard that joke a different way. Is what do you call a woman with two black eyes? And the answer was Dolly Parton in a jogging outfit.
Yeah, that one too. Oh God, that's so good. Oh, I needed this. I needed this humor break because all this other crap just annoys me to no end. And I have to say, as I've gotten older, like I have a deeper appreciation of dad jokes more than I used to. Like I love a good dad joke anymore. As dumb as they are. And I have to tell you this story too. So there's a gal I work with. She is an absolute sweetheart. Well, I used to work with her, and I used to work in a department with her. And she's an absolute sweetheart. Just the nicest person in the world. But if you want to talk about the stereotype of a blonde is there, ditzy as all get out. She was. So I told her a joke one day, and I said, hey, what'd the farmer say when he couldn't find his tractor? And she's like, I don't know. I was like, where's my tractor? And she stared at me, deer in the headlights, and she's like, I don't get it. I was like, when you lose your car keys and you're like, where's my car keys? She's like, yeah, but I don't get the joke. So she comes back the next day, and she's like, I told my husband that joke. He tried to explain it to me, and I still don't get it. But here's the thing. I told her another joke. Okay, I told her a joke. There's 3 little boys walking down the street, and each of them had 50 cents. This is an old joke because kids carry around more than 50 cents now. But anyway, and so they're all trying to decide what they want to do with their money. So the first little boy goes, I think we should pool our money together and go watch a movie. And the second kid goes, I think we should pool our money together and go to the candy store and buy a bunch of candy. And the third little boy says, I think we should pool our money and go buy Kotex. And they're like, Kotex? Why would we buy Kotex? He's like, oh, because with Kotex, you can play tennis, you can go swimming, you can go horseback riding. She got that joke because of the old Kotex commercial. But where's my tractor eluded her, just right over her head. And I also worked with another blonde who I told the blonde joke to. I said, hey, there's this blonde. And she told her husband she's getting really sick and tired of blondes getting this bad reputation for being dumb. So she told her husband, I'm going to go study all the state capitals. And then you give me a week, and then I'm going to come downstairs, and then you give me a test. And her husband's like, okay. And she's like, okay, I'm ready. I did my studying. He goes, all right, Wyoming. She goes, duh, it's W. I tell this blonde woman at work the joke, and she's like, there's no such state as Wyoming. What are you talking? I just looked at her and it's like, you don't think? She's like, no, there's no such state as Wyoming. I was like, you get off work, you go buy a map of the U.S. and look in the upper left, the northwest of the country, and you will find a state called Wyoming. But yeah, she didn't think there was a state called Wyoming. So I have worked with some people who are the biggest sweethearts, and I don't know. I don't know how to say. It's like the cheese fell off their cracker a long time ago. Like Tom, you alluded to, you have a lot of empty space upstairs. I think if you would have put your ear to their ear, you could have heard the sea. It was just like a. It was astonishing. But anyway,
in fairness to that lady, I can't think of a single thing in Wyoming. Like, I know it's a state, but I can't think of a single reason why I would go to Wyoming. I forget it's a state often. When I'm going in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, Wyoming. It's like North Dakota. It's like, they tell me there's people there. I'd have to be there to see it. I don't know. Never met anyone from Wyoming.
I've never met anyone from Wyoming, but I have met people from North and South Dakota. In fact, There used to be guys. There was a guy that was around Owensville. He was originally from Owensville when they started that whole. I think it was part of the Keystone Pipeline. He went up there to drive a truck because the money he was going to make per hour was like crazy, like $60-$70 an hour up there, or at least 50 to drive a truck for that pipeline as they were expanding it and building onto it. And there were a couple local people here that went up there as welders or whatever and was making stupid amounts of money. And I was like, good for them. But he goes, yeah, it's great now. He's like, go up there in the wintertime. And it is horrific when you're talking minus 50-degree wind chills and all this other crap. It is terrible.
I had a friend who, when I lived out in Columbia, he used to go up to, he was doing, I think it was electrical. I think he did electrical work. It was some sort of carpentry, it was electrical or something. But yeah, he used to only go up there, and he used to only work the wintertime. So he would go up there when they was free, when it was negative temperatures and it was snowing and blizzard conditions, and he'd go up there and work, but he only worked the winter. He'd come back home with enough money to not work again for the next 9 months. So yeah, if you're willing to go up there and work in those conditions, you can make bank.
Hey, Brandon, do you live near a railroad track?
I do.
Do you ever see coal cars that are filled heading in one direction?
Yeah, I see cars. I couldn't tell you exactly what. I don't see coal hanging out the top of them, but it does run through.
Okay, next time you see one of those coal cars, just think to yourself, that is filled with a product from Wyoming. Almost 50% of the mined coal in this country comes from the state of Wyoming.
Really? I would have never guessed that. I would have figured it would be somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains or something. That surprises me.
No, it's Wyoming. They produce, I think it's like 43% of the coal is produced here in the United States.
Huh.
So, Brandon, you may not know this, but Tom is also known as a man who is filled with what he says is a lot of useless facts. Useless. He is. He's got all these facts in his head. I've seen him on X and everything else.
You got to remember, I drove semi for about 15 years, so I've got probably 4 million miles traveling back and forth in all the 48 continental states, at least 5 of the provinces up in Canada. And there are things just kind of like the Constitution. I don't have the whole thing memorized, but there are parts that for some reason it got embedded in my head and I can't get it out. It's like those, what do you call those songs that get stuck in your head and it just plays over and over and over again, like an earwig. That's this useless information I have stored in my head.
He's like a Russian agent. He couldn't just remember these things, but there'll be trigger words that set him off. Like I'll say Wyoming, he'll be like coal, lots of coal.
Yeah, that's like there are things that work that I can't remember, but then if you ask me about a certain insect, because I was in pest control field for like 5 or 6 years, you could ask me things about roaches or termites or spiders, and I can just rattle off for 15 solid minutes about this insect. Information that I don't really need anymore because I don't do the work. Now, I find insects and stuff and the biology and all that stuff, I found it fascinating because I'm nerdy. But I don't need it anymore. I don't go to work and apply a pesticide to kill insects. I'm there looking out after like environmental and health and safety things now. That's my new job. But I had somebody the other day ask me about termites or something, and I rattled off the best treatment and the biology and the sociology of the insect, how they act socially, and all these things, and why they do this and why they do that. And the guy's just looking at me like he's listening. He knows I'm not pulling his leg, but I'm sitting there going, God, I need a life. I can rattle off for 10 solid minutes about termites, but like, hey, what did you eat for dinner yesterday? Dude, I can't remember nothing. I don't know. I plumb forgot what I ate for breakfast this morning, let alone. But yeah, if you ask me about why a certain pesticide works the best on spiders, I can tell you all about. encapsulation of the pesticide, and the way the spider's foot is like a claw, so it binds to it, bursts open, and because their lungs are on the bottom, then it gets up in and it kills. I could go on forever. So sometimes I feel like, even though I'm not in high school anymore, I still feel like the nerdy guy around at work, because I have this information on things that most people just go, why do you know all that? Like, what is the thing? This is completely off topic, but I have to tell you guys this, because like science stuff blows my mind. So apparently they took a quantum of light and pushed it 30 kilometers through fiber optic. Now they expect when they push a photon of light at a quantum level through existing infrastructure of fiber optic, that it will entangle to something else, and by the time it gets to the other side, it's entangled. And it didn't. They took a photon of light and put it at one end and made that travel 30 kilometers without, and coming out at the other end as the whole photon, the quantum photon of light, without it entangling into anything else. So it's like this big breakthrough, because they're saying this could help with internet security and encryption, as passing this from one end to the other, almost like teleportation. But they're saying this could be huge in internet security. I don't know if I believe that, because I feel like the Department of Defense could be screwing with that and be like, here's a good way to hack into people's computers better, and they'll never know that we went from this point to this point and back and forth, and it never got caught up in anything else, and we transported this little photon emission through the fiber optic and got it over here, and they have no idea we planted it there. So I don't know. I don't know that I fully trust what they're trying to do, but I'm sitting there reading the article, and my mind is about smoking, because I'm not smart enough to understand quantum physics, but I found it fascinating that somehow they're passing a photon of light across a fiber optic cable, because they thought they were going to have to build a whole new infrastructure for this thing in order to do this. So they're like, this is useless because we have to build a whole new infrastructure. And now they're saying, no, we don't. We shot it through fiber optic with like, I don't know, it's like 400 and something gigabits per second fiber optic, and it didn't touch anything else, and found its way 30 kilometers to the other end without entangling itself on anything else. And I don't understand the whole philosophy behind it, but it is mind-blowing, and it just reinforces the fact that sometimes I can make myself feel even dumber just by reading that article.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm way too dumb to even know if that's impressive. Like, I don't even know if that's even like, I don't know if you can shoot a photon 30 kilometers through something else. Like, I don't know how impressive that is, but it sounds good. It's like whenever they did the Higgs boson, where they shot those atoms and smashed them together at light speed, and something cool happened. They like opened a mini wormhole or something. Again, I'm too dumb to even understand how cool it is, but
I just know that the Higgs boson is a particle that grants mass to other particles. So it's almost like a field. So when a particle moves through it, if it moves through quickly, that element is light and it doesn't have a lot of mass. If it moves through the field slowly, then it's said that element has greater mass. So the Higgs boson, also known as the God particle, grants mass to all other elements. It is how they measure the weight of an element, is with the Higgs boson, or the God element. I just remember watching something. We are like way off. We started out with Justin Sparks controversy, and now we're on Higgs boson and and physics and chemistry. And how did we get here? I feel like,
because it's a spark of light, isn't it?
Oh, look at Tom tying it all together.
Oh. That's my brain exploding for those listening.
Again, this is why I love Tom so, because Tom can just come in with his wit and make everything, and make me not sound like I've had a stroke and I went off road and for 15, 20 miles, and people are like, how the hell did we end up at this destination? Like, oh, well, John's driving and he's a crackhead. So thanks, Tom.
Since we have 15 minutes left, unless Tom had something super pressing that he wanted to get to, I have something that I wanted to close on.
What do you got? You got anything else,
Lay it
Tom?
on
Okay.
Okay,
Nope,
so
lay it on.
big news going around the last couple days has been this tweet from Vivek Ramaswamy
Oh, yes.
talking about American culture. I'll read the tweet for you guys really quick, and then you guys let me know your opinion. This is quote from the top. The reason top tech companies often hire foreign-born and first-generation engineers over native in quotes like Americans isn't because of an innate American IQ deficit, a lazy and wrong explanation. A key part of it comes down to the C word, culture. Tough questions demand tough answers, and if we're really serious about fixing the problem, we have to confront the truth. Our American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence for way too long, at least since the 90s and likely longer. That doesn't start in college, it starts young. A culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad champ or the jock over the valedictorian will not produce the best engineers. A culture that venerates Corey from Boy Meets World or Zach and Slater over Screech and Saved by the Bell or Stefan over Steve Urkel and Family Matters will not produce the best engineers. Fact, I know multiple sets of immigrant parents in the 90s who actively limited how much their kids could watch those TV shows precisely because they promoted mediocrity. And their kids went on to become wildly successful STEM graduates. More movies like Whiplash, fewer reruns of Friends, more math tutoring, fewer sleepovers, more weekend science competitions, fewer Saturday morning cartoons, more books, less TV, more creating, less chilling, more extracurriculars, less hanging out at the mall. Most normal American parents look skeptically at those kinds of parents. More normal American kids view those kinds of kids with scorn. If you grew up aspiring to normalcy, normalcy is what you will achieve. Now close your eyes and visualize which families you knew in the 90s, or even now, who raised their kids according to one model versus the other. Be brutally honest. Normalcy doesn't cut in a hyper-competitive global market for technical talent. And if we pretend it does, we'll have our butts handed to us by China. This can be our Sputnik moment. We've awakened from slumber before and we can do it again. Trump's election hopefully marks the new beginning of a golden era in America, but only if our culture fully wakes up. A culture that once again prioritizes achievement over normalcy, excellence over mediocrity, and nerdiness over conformity, hard work over laziness. That's the work we have cut out for us. Rather than wallowing in victimhood and wishing or legislating alternative hiring practices into existence, I'm confident we can do it. Basically calling Americans a bunch of lazy dummies.
What do you think, Tom?
Well, when I first read that, I was kind of ticked off that he mentioned Steve Urkel because I loved Urkel. Did I do that? But anyhow, I think in all sincerity, he's got a point. The work ethic in this country has, I'm going to say in the last 30 years, has deteriorated to the point where it used to be that when your shift started at 8 o'clock, you were there at 7:30. And you even gave, sometimes 15, 20 minutes of work and then went and punched in and did the things that you do. Now I've got some of my own customers who, their store opens at 8 o'clock. So I set an appointment at 8 o'clock and I'm sitting there at about 7:45 and 8 o'clock rolls around. Still nobody. Then 8:05, 8:10, 8:15. Think, what happened to the point where you always get to someplace early? What happens to the point where you actually started working at the time that you were supposed to be working? What happened to the point where, you did the best that you could for your employer in hopes that this would be recognized and you would make greater strides in advancement? But I think it's also twofold. Not only is it the worker, it's also the employer. But based on what I see in all of my travels today, I wouldn't give you a nickel for most of the people who are educated in this country, who went to college in this country. That's why the Asians, the Japanese, the Koreans, the Guamanians, the Filipinos, they run circles around us because it is a family-oriented culture, and generally the studies come first, everything else comes second.
Yeah, I'll say this, guys. I've noticed a trend, especially when it came to a bond issue here locally, that we tend to keep promoting high school sports above the, it seems like the sports of the school gets elevated more than the actual education of the kids. And I get it. Sports for children, as far as fitness and everything, is great for them. And learning, competition's a good thing for kids. But when it gets put above and beyond, like, oh, we need, I mean, they found money several years back to put a new AstroTurf, artificial turf down on the field and a new track. And then, but here's the thing. They told everybody, oh, the school's going to spend this money, and then it'll be for public use. Well, every year they have the Relay for Life, and so they got the track all done, and then they told them, you can't use the track, okay? And then they wanted new lights for the field, and they wanted to redo the turf again and all this so we could compete better with the other schools as far as, putting out a winning team and having – and I'm like – okay, why is this so much more important than education? But sports has taken such a stranglehold, and I don't have anything against sports, really. I enjoy hockey. I like watching hockey. I like going to hockey games. I'm not much into pro football, a little bit of college football. Not much into baseball. Hockey's my thing. But I don't put it above everything else. I don't put sports above my liberty. I don't put sports above education. Actually educating, not what they pass as education, but actual education of the kids. But this seems to be a reoccurring theme around the country, is how good like parents will, how good are their sports teams? Like so it's like all these parents who played sports in school or didn't. I didn't play sports throughout my high school years. They want to live vicariously through their kids. And they'll take them to these camps, and they try to get them better. And it's like they think that, like, if your kid's team wins the state championship, that they've won they won the Lombardi Trophy, and it's gotten to an absurd level. But that does bug me. Again, I don't have any problem with kids playing sports in school, because if they're getting if they're weight training and they're becoming stronger and they're becoming more fit, okay, great. And you're learning and you got people with different personalities working together as a team. Okay, that's cool. But again, when you seemingly sometimes prioritize that over education, that's where I have a big problem, because education is terrible enough. And then when you start trying to add bond money, or trying to get more bond money, or more money for a school bond to upgrade your sports complexes or build a new sports complex, I have a major problem with that. And if you're a parent who has a kid and you're moving to a different school district and you're basing your decision on how good the football team or the baseball team is, then you also have a problem. And you're hindering, I think, the development of your kid educationally by prioritizing how good the sports team is over the actual education that they will be receiving in said school. That is my major issue with education and these schools as a whole anymore. And I think it does kind of lend to Vivek Ramaswamy's argument about, we seem to be, a lot of people seem to be kind of happy with how the schools operate. Their beef is the teachers are underpaid. Okay, but again, in Missouri, DESE has almost 2,000 employees. And their salaries come from education budget. So if you could cut 80-90% of DESE employment out and then take that money, you could get the teachers a pay raise without having to increase the budget. They won't do that. They just say, we need more money. We need more money. We need more money. But it's incentivizing mediocrity in the schools. These kids aren't getting any better education. We're not climbing the ranks in the world rank of education systems. We keep falling in those scores. So, okay, let's take a bigger, let's zoom out from 3,000 miles up and take a wide angle look at what we're doing. Clearly, it's not working. Clearly, the system has failed. So you have to make up your mind. Do you throw money at a bottomless pit, or do you get rid of the Department of Education and find a new way of doing things, whether that's creating homeschool networks, which some people are already doing, or you localize and give complete local control to education in a town, and it's not getting a bunch of federal and state money, and the towns have to figure it out. Do you do these things, or do you continue down the road of mediocrity and play along with the government's game and the politicians' game of convincing you that you need to just throw more money at this? And at some point, we're at $12.5 billion for the Missouri state school budget, and it hasn't improved. So maybe $13.5 billion to do it. Maybe $15 billion to do it. No, it's not. But people just haven't learned their lesson. They haven't figured this out yet. And yes, we do promote, and then we have the high schools telling kids to this day not to go to tech schools, not to go to these things, go to college, get a useless degree, so when you get out of school, you can't find a job in the field that you went to school for, so you ended up at Starbucks making $18 an hour. That is a problem. And if that's the system that this country is going to continue to run under, then yes, we will have to pull people from other countries who actually focus on educating their kids in the STEM fields and learn and have been taught much better. We'll have to depend on them if this is a system that we are seem hell-bent. Most people seem hell-bent on keeping around and working within this broken system. I don't think that we're going to see an uptick in people from this country in the STEM fields if we don't curtail and cut off the Department of Education and the federal guidelines on the curriculum and everything else. This will continue to happen, and then we'll have two groups of people fighting over immigrants and non-immigrant employees in the tech fields, because they're not even looking at the actual issue that's caused this whole freaking thing to begin with. That's just my take.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway from this whole thing to me, it's not even necessarily about the tech because I feel like I'm a pretty smart person. I just don't want to do those things. And you can call me lazy or whatever it is, but I'm content with my life. I don't stress. You know what I mean? It's just about a matter of what's important to you. If having a lot of money and being having success at your career is of value to you, then sure. But it's subjective in itself. You don't have to want to be an engineer. You can want to just go work at your restaurant and live your life in however you want. It doesn't, I think he's a little bit critical of American culture here, but he's really only focusing on the people who earn a lot. But there are a lot of, even if there were a bunch of engineers in America, you would still need the people who work at restaurants. You would still need the people who do all these other jobs. And some people are just totally content. And I defy him to tell me why I'm not allowed to be content with my, if I'm not on the government, if I'm not collecting a government welfare check, then I don't see what just doesn't feel like it applies to me very much. But what does apply, and the big point that I think he makes, is that you can't solve a lot of society's issues with the stroke of a pen. It involves a cultural change. The culture has shifted in America to value different things. And you're not going to legislate your way out of cultural change. It's going to have to come from the outside and then affect government. It's going to have to be enough people deciding we don't need the government to hand us a bunch of stuff. We don't need this and that. That's what it's going to societal change and wanting to be self-sufficient for each person and wanting to be good at your job is something that you're just parents have to teach their kids. You can't send them to school necessarily. You can't expect to send someone to school or watch TV to learn morality. That's something you have to teach your kids, or you're going to have to learn from a person of importance in your life that you value their opinion. And so I do think he's very right that this is the issues that we face, and a lot of people mistake that. I think the big important thing is that a lot of people feel like, oh well, now that Donald Trump's in charge, things are going to change. And I remember telling you when he would earlier, way before the election, I was like, even if Donald Trump wins this election, the woke left or whatever entity it's going to be next, they'll still control the schools, they'll still control the media, they'll control the colleges. So you're going to have to, as a society, continue to fight these battles the way you fight for your liberty all the time. And so I think he's right about that point, but I do think he just overgeneralizes that some people are just content, they're not lazy. Those are my opinions on it.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, go ahead and close out the show for us. We've got about 2 minutes left. So,
well, I don't have 2 minutes. You guys finish it out. But I think one of the worst things that ever occurred is when homeownership became the American dream. It absolutely boggled my mind that somebody else was defining for me and 300 million Americans that, well, home ownership is the American dream. No, what about being a business owner? What about, taking 2 weeks vacation a year? What about, owning the car that you want? What about just moving out of your parents' basement? The fact that somebody decides that the American dream is home ownership, and then they keep promoting that message and promoting it. And then we have to start acquiescing to it. And lo and behold, we ended up with a housing crash, simply, I think, because most people were thinking, hey, the American dream is homeownership. No, the American dream is whatever you think your American dream is. And whatever that is, go for it. Just don't infringe upon somebody else's rights to do it.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Thanks to Tom and Catherine for joining us once again this week. And as you, Tom, rattle off real quick the radio station and what time you're on the air on Fridays.
7 a.m. to 8 a.m. KSGF. That's 104.1 FM, 1260 AM, KSGF.com. And generally, if you're looking at the podcast, you'll see a little Lock and Smith Foundation that's superimposed on top of a Missouri flag with the Capitol building in the background. It's easy to find. This morning, I had all 3 hours.
Awesome sauce. Well, thanks again to Tom and Catherine, and thanks to all of you out there in radio and podcast and internet land. And we'll see you next week right here on the Missouri Liberty Report.